Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, basically every service that is owned by Facebook went down today, and the normie internet has been thrown into crisis. You see, WhatsApp is by far the most used communication app on the planet, with over 2 billion monthly active users. And then in a far second place, with about 2/3 the amount of users, is Facebook Messenger. Now, most people don't have a plan C for something like communicating with their friends and family, or really a plan C in general. And the ones that do, they just mostly went to Twitter and Snapchat because of course they did, and the influx of traffic there on those services was actually enough to cause Twitter and Snapchat outages for some people. I mean, think about it. Facebook and Instagram, as far as I know, these are the biggest social media platforms. So when they both go down and now everybody's going to, the third or fourth, however big Twitter is, their servers aren't really designed to be able to handle that much traffic. In fact, Facebook services being down has actually caused a bit of a domino effect that is causing different kinds of outages across the internet and even sort of off of the internet, as we'll talk about in a moment. But the worst of which is probably the strain on DNS servers. Now, as far as I know, this hasn't gotten too severe because I actually didn't even know that Facebook was down when I was at work because thankfully my job isn't super dependent on Facebook services. But DNS server strain is something that can affect basically everybody that's using the internet. So in case you don't know how this works, DNS servers are what map Facebook.com or really any kind of website's URL to the IP address of their server so that you can actually go into Facebook when you type facebook.com and then log in and do whatever it is that people do there. Well, Facebook's DNS records, more specifically the BGP routes that are serving Facebook's authoritative DNS, were withdrawn, which is why it's affecting Instagram and Messenger and WhatsApp, basically all of their internet properties as well. And of course, most people aren't aware of this. So when Facebook or Instagram don't load on their computers, they just think it's a problem with their computer or maybe their internet at home. So what do? They refresh Facebook.com, they refresh Instagram.com, they refresh Messenger, they refresh WhatsApp, and then this is sending a query to the DNS server. And it doesn't load, so they try it again and again and again. And maybe they'll start pulling out their phone or they'll pull out a tablet or some other device and then try it again and again and again. Essentially, all of their users are kind of DDoSing DNS servers across the world. But it gets a lot worse. Many of the products or services that you might not even think of as being owned by or having some type of hard dependency on Facebook actually are and actually do. For example, as you can see from the chart here, many people are reporting outages with Oculus, which makes sense because Facebook actually owns Oculus, in case you didn't know, so when they go down, so does your VR world. Apps like Spotify and many of the food delivery apps, they don't handle their own logins. They have you log in with Facebook or with Google, and even if the app does give you an option of making a username and password, people are still typically going to choose to just log in with Google or with Facebook because they don't want to have another account and password to manage, even though password managers are a thing, and I recommend that everybody uses them, but, of course, normies don't listen. But the thing is, if those services can't contact Facebook to authenticate, it's a wrap. You just gotta wait for Facebook to fix their stuff, or you have to go and create a brand new account. Boo-hoo if you had some type of Spotify Premium or whatever, Grubhub Plus or whatever these different apps offer, and that was tied to a Facebook account. Boo-hoo, you can't access it. Even in the corporate world, there are people who had business meetings today, maybe concerning some very big deals. Well, not today because Facebook was down, which means if you were dependent on using, I think it's called Facebook Rooms that some corporations are using for meetings, that's owned by Facebook. So if Facebook is down, then that means Rooms are down. And that's also really hilarious on the corporate end because Slack, Another popular messaging platform used in the corporate world was actually just down last Friday. So yeah, and corporate things kind of suck right now. Many people have Internet of Things devices that they are dependent on Facebook for that are not working right now because of the Facebook outage. And again, employees that are in offices can't even access the physical conference room because they are Internet of Things and they depend on Facebook. A lot of people are also reporting outages at like Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T, as you can see here. But I'm pretty sure that these people are just trying to access Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, or apps on their phone that require Facebook login. Because let's be honest, that's what the majority of most people are doing on their phones these days. So people are just reporting outages there without really understanding the problem. Now, nobody knows for sure why these BGP routes were withdrawn. Facebook hasn't made any official statements yet. But a person on Reddit by the name of Ramen Porn, who claims to be a Facebook employee that is working on the issue, said that the BGP peering with Facebook peering routers has gone down, very likely due to a configuration change that went into effect shortly before the outages happened, starting roughly around 1540 UTC. There are people now trying to gain access to the peering routers to implement fixes, but the people with physical access are separate from the people with knowledge of how to actually authenticate to the systems and people who know what to actually do. So there is a logistical challenge with getting all of that knowledge unified. I don't know how legit this is. It's been quoted by several other news sites reporting on the outage, but it's literally from some person on Reddit who deleted their account slightly afterwards, so take it with a grain of salt. But if this is true, holy crap, Facebook has serious logistical issues. Imagine being dependent on this company for communicating with your friends and family, and then all of that gets taken away by somebody making a small mistake in a configuration file. One thing I do find highly suspicious about all this, though, is that it's taking place right after the 60 Minutes interview with Frances Haugen, an ex-Facebook employee who filed complaints about Facebook with federal law enforcement. And what were these complaints, you ask? Oh, just the fact that Facebook's own research shows that their platform subverts and destroys society. They poison the mind of young people and promote hate and divisiveness because that is what is most profitable for Facebook. Now, generally, I recommend against using social media, all of them, not just the ones that are owned by Facebook. They're all pretty toxic, but Facebook hyper-optimizes its toxicity. It knows that Instagram gives girls a negative body image, a negative self-image. It knows that Facebook fuels the fires of political divisiveness, and instead, they chose to keep that secret and just line their own pockets. What a coincidence that right after evidence of Facebook manipulating societies and undermining governments of nations all over the world, they decide to go dark. This is yet more evidence that Facebook is an evil company. It's being laid out right before your eyes. I can't help but notice the parallels between this and the Edward Snowden leaks, and it saddens me to know that this revelation from Facebook's internal documents leaking will likely be treated the same way. Normies will tweet about it for a week and then move on to the next thing that is coming down their Facebook feeding tubes.